guys? Dimension Master Studios here. How y'all doing? So I'm sure as you guys know, recently I made a video talking about Akita being alive when it comes to Dragon's Rising, because for those of you who don't know, yes, Akita is alive. This is something that we saw in the 104th issue of the Ninjago magazine, and given that the comics in the magazines are meant to be canon, this means that when it comes to Akita, she is indeed alive when it comes to Ninjago. And with Akita being alive, it led me to think the obvious question. If Akita is indeed alive, then what does that mean for her return when it comes to Dragon's Rising? How and when is it going to happen? And what could the writers do with Akita's character if she were to return? And those are all things that I'm going to answer in this video. But before we get into anything, there is one thing that I do have to say first, and it's that this video will contain spoilers for Season 2 of Dragon's Rising, because there are some things that were said in the descriptions for the upcoming episodes for Part 1 of Season 2 of Dragon's Rising that I will be referencing in this video, as well as also some images that have been released for Season 2 of Dragon's Rising. So if you haven't seen any of that stuff, just as a reminder, this video will contain spoilers for Season 2 of Dragon's Rising. And so with all that out of the way, let's get into this whole thing. So let's start off with asking the big question when it comes to Akita's return: when is this going to happen? And as for the exact time as to when this is going to happen, this is something that I'm not really sure about specifically, and I can't really place down a certain time as to when this will happen during the events of the season. Like, I can't predict which season Akita will appear in, although I do hope that it does happen sooner rather than later when it comes to Dragon's Rising. But again, as for the exact time, I'm not entirely sure about that. However, I feel like there is a possible time frame that we can take a look at as to when Akita will show up again, and this also relates into answering the question of how will the writers reintroduce Akita into the franchise. And I feel like when it comes to when will Akita return and how will Akita return, I feel like both of these questions can actually be answered by the exact same thing, and that is the Never Realm. This is something that I brought up during my Akita is Alive video, but like I said during that video, when it comes to Dragon's Rising, a major focus of this era of the show is all the different realms being combined in order to create one gigantic realm that everyone lives on. And something that I feel we're going to see over the events of Dragon's Rising is the ninja going to every single realm at some point during this era of the show. It only makes sense. Meaning that when it comes to the ninja, they are eventually going to go back to the Never Realm at some point. And I feel like when the ninja do eventually go back to the Never Realm, that is when the show will finally reintroduce Akita. Because I think we can all agree that if the ninja go back to the Never Realm and Akita doesn't show up, then it's going to be a gigantic wasted opportunity. And it's something that only makes sense. So when it comes to Akita's return, I feel like this is something that's less of a case of it being something that could happen or something that's likely to happen, but instead, I feel like Akita is one of the very few Ninjago characters where we can actually say that her return is inevitable and it's something that will happen, because again, I feel like Akita's return is something that is going to happen when the ninja do eventually go back to the Neverrealm at some point during Dragon's Rising. But now there's another question that we have to answer when it comes to this. Why would the ninja go back to the Neverrealm in the first place? When it comes to the ninja, I feel like there would have to be some kind of story reason as to why they would decide to go back to the Neverrealm. I feel like that's something that would make sense. And as for the exact story reason, I'm not entirely sure about that. Sure, the writers could come up with some kind of generic thing like maybe the Neverrealm is in danger so the ninja go to save it. I feel like that is a pretty simple thing that could end up happening. However, I have an interesting idea that I feel could actually relate into the stuff that we've seen so far when it comes to Dragon's Rising that would make sense for a story reason as to why the ninja would go back to the Neverrealm, and it all has to do with the character of Fritz. Remember, Fritz is that foreman kid that we met during Season 1 of Dragon's Rising, and he was one of the Finders alongside Spitz, Geo, and Bonzel. And as we learned during Season 1 of Dragon's Rising, when it comes to all four of these characters, all of them ended up getting lost in one way or another, and they wound up in the land of lost things, and apparently they are unable to escape from it. However, according to the episode descriptions for Season 2 of Dragon's Rising, and this is where the spoilers are going to come into play, we learn that Cole is going to be able to help the Finders escape from the Land of Lost Things, and they will eventually wind up at the monastery with Zane. We even see in one of the screenshots for an upcoming episode, we see Zane and Cole talking to Bonsall at the monastery, meaning that when it comes to the Finders, including Fritz, they will eventually be able to escape from the Land of Lost Things. And this is where I feel like things could get interesting, because when it comes to Fritz and Spitz, the two of them are kids, and something that I feel we could potentially see is the ninja trying to reunite these two with their families, and the ninja might try to get these two home safely. Thus meaning that when it comes to Fritz being a formling, this would mean that when it comes to the ninja, they would have to go back to the Neverrealm in order to return Fritz to his family. And when the ninja go back to the Neverrealm, I feel like this would be the perfect opportunity for the writers to reintroduce Akita into the franchise. The writers at this point, I feel, have the perfect opportunity to have a story that revolves around the ninja going back to the Neverrealm with them helping out Fritz, and something that I do hope we get a chance to see at some point during Dragon's Rising is the writers taking this opportunity in order to have an interesting story reason as to why the ninja would go back to the Neverrealm by having it relate into stuff that we've seen so far when it comes to Dragon's Rising. So again, when it comes to Akita's return, I feel like this is something that's going to happen when the ninja do eventually go back to the Neverrealm at some point during the events of Dragon's Rising. Now, I have no idea when this is going to happen, and really the only thing that I can do is hope that this is going to happen sooner rather than later, and personally, I feel like we probably aren't going to see this happen during Season 2 of Dragon's Rising because of everything that's going on during the season. Stuff like the Forbidden Five, the Wolf Mask Warriors, the Blood Moon, the Rising Dragon technique, the whole thing going on with Jay, everything with the tournament, and more. Again, Season 2 has a lot of stuff that's going on with it, and while I'm not saying it's impossible, I don't think it's entirely likely, even though a major thing that we are seeing during Season 2 is the villains having a wolf theme revolving around them. So, who knows, maybe we could see something, but personally, I doubt it. Although something interesting that I do want to point out, Season 1 of Dragon's Rising also had an interesting wolf theme when it came to the antagonists, with the foe-type creatures being giant wolves. Now we have Season 2 of Dragon's Rising with the Wolf Mask Warriors, and if the show were to indeed continue on with this wolf theme going forward, then I feel like Season 3 would be the perfect opportunity to bring Akita back and to continue on with the wolf theme that we've been seeing so far. But we're just going to have to wait and see. But now, there's one last thing that I want to discuss when it comes to Akita's return, and it's what the writers could potentially do with Akita as a character if she were to be brought back. Admittedly, a fear that I have had that revolves around the idea of Akita returning is that when it comes to the writers, if they were to bring Akita back, then potentially the writers wouldn't really do anything with her, and Akita would essentially be brought back just for the sake of her being brought back. Kind of like what we saw during Crystallize with a bunch of the older characters returning during that season, but a lot of them really didn't get that much to do during the season, especially with the ninja allies during the final 2 episodes, and it felt like a lot of them were brought back essentially just for easy fan service. And personally, I really don't want to see that with Akita, or really any Ninjago character for that fact. So something that I want to go over is some ideas that I have as to potential things that we could see happen with Akita if she were to return. So for starters, the first idea that I have is Akita being open to the idea of people from other realms ending up in the Neverrealm. Something that we saw happen at the very beginning of Dragon's Rising was the Merge, this massive event that resulted in all the different realms combining into one realm in order to create a gigantic realm that everyone lives on. And as we see all throughout Season 1, a lot of people ended up getting displaced as a result of the Merge, and a lot of people ended up in realms that they weren't supposed to, meaning it's entirely possible that there were some people who ended up inside of the Neverrealm even though they weren't supposed to, and something that I feel we we could see is the people of the Neverrealm potentially being fearful about the idea of people from other realms ending up inside of the Neverrealm. Because while yes, things turned out well with the ninja, with them being good people, and the ninja were able to help out the people of the Neverrealm, there was also the Ice Emperor, who did a lot of really bad stuff in the Neverrealm, and it's possible that when it comes to the people of the Neverrealm, they might be worried that a future Ice Emperor type situation could end up happening if someone from another realm ended up inside of the Neverrealm. So again, they might not be too happy with the idea of people from other realms ending up inside of their home realm. However, I feel like Akita would be an exception to this, given everything that happened between her and Lloyd during the Ice chapter, and when it comes to Akita, something big that we saw from her during that season was her learning how to overcome her trust issues, and her gaining a more optimistic and hopeful view on the world. And I feel like as a result of the stuff that Akita went through with Lloyd during the Ice chapter, it could result in Akita being kind to the people who end up in the Neverrealm and her trying to help them out in some way or another, which I think could honestly be something pretty interesting, and it would make sense given the stuff that we saw with Akita during the events of Season 11. After this, we then have what has got to be my most far out there idea when it comes to Akita's return, and I feel like this is the least likely thing to happen, but it's something that I still feel could be interesting, and that is the show potentially delving into stuff with Akita's powers. So obviously Akita is a formling, meaning she has the ability to shapeshift between a human form and an animal form. And something interesting that we see with the formlings is that whenever they transform, they always have this blue aura around them whenever they transform between a human form and an animal form. However, Akita is the exception to this, because whenever she transforms, we actually see a pink aura around her, not a blue one. And no, Akita having a pink aura is not because she's a girl, because during the episode Last of the Formlings, we actually see some female formlings transform during this episode, and they also have a blue aura. Meaning that when it comes to Akita, her pink aura is something that only she has and no other formling has. Which I feel raises the obvious question, why does Akita have a pink aura and not a blue one like everyone else? And this is where I feel like the show could potentially delve into Akita's powers. Because I feel like with Akita being a formling, I feel like it's possible that with her having a pink aura, this is something that could actually be very significant when it comes to her as a formling, and it means that there's something about her that's different in comparison to all the other formlings and them all having blue auras. As to what exactly that thing is, I'm not entirely too sure about that, but I feel like it could be interesting if the season did delve into this and we got some kind of proper explanation as to why Akita has a pink aura instead of a blue one. Moving on from this, the next idea that I have is tying in stuff with Akita to the Ice Emperor storyline. Now, yes, we did get a proper conclusion to the Ice Emperor story in Quest for the Lost Powers, where during this book, we finally saw Zane confronting the trauma that he went through as a result of him being the Ice Emperor, and we saw Zane making peace with him being the Ice Emperor, with Zane eventually being able to forgive himself for the stuff that he did in the Neverrealm. And while I feel like this does work really well as a conclusion for the Ice Emperor storyline, and it's something that I did honestly really like, I still feel like there's one other thing that the show could do with the Ice Emperor storyline, and that is having Zane seeking forgiveness from the people of the Neverrealm. Because while Zane was able to forgive himself for the stuff that he did as the Ice Emperor, it's possible that the people of the Neverrealm might not be so forgiving for the stuff that he did. And honestly, I wouldn't really blame them, because even though Zane wasn't in control with him as the Ice Emperor, because the only reason why Zane did any of the stuff that he did in the first place was because of the Scroll of Forbidden Spinjitzu corrupting him and Vex's lies and manipulation, Zane still did a lot of pretty bad stuff as the Ice Emperor. So again, I wouldn't really blame the people of the Neverrealm for them not being too willing to forgive Zane. However, something that I think could be really interesting is seeing Akita being either the first or even the only person in the Neverrealm to actually forgive Zane for the stuff that he did as the Ice Emperor, and I think that this is something that would be really interesting for the both of their characters. when it comes to Zane, remember, the idea is that he would be trying to seek forgiveness from the people of the Neverrealm, and when it comes to Zane, he might take comfort in the fact that even though he was able to get the forgiveness of only one person, that might just be enough for him to feel good about what happened, and he might be able to finally make peace with everything that happened. And when it comes to Akita, I feel like this would be something really interesting for her, given that a major goal that Akita had during the Ice chapter was her wanting to get revenge on the Ice Emperor. That is, until the final episode, when we finally saw Akita letting go of the idea of revenge. And Akita going from wanting to get revenge on the Ice Emperor to forgiving the Ice Emperor, I think that could honestly be something really interesting. Additionally, though, I feel like this would make sense because of a major thing that we saw with the Lloyd and Akita dynamic during the Ice chapter, which was the idea of letting go of the past and finding a way to move on into the future. This is what we saw with Akita, with her letting go of the idea of getting revenge, and it's something that we saw from Lloyd with him finally letting go of his obsession surrounding his failures with Harumi, and I feel like Akita forgiving the Ice Emperor after wanting to get revenge on him for so long would be a really interesting way to continue on with the idea of, again, letting go of the past and finding a way to move forward into the future. Personally, I think that would honestly be something really interesting to see. And finally, there is one last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to what the writers could do with Akita's return, and it is by far the most obvious thing, and the thing that I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably been waiting for me to talk about, and that is a continuation of the Lloyd and Akita dynamic and storyline that we saw play out during the events of the Ice chapter. Again, I feel like this is by far the most obvious thing to talk about, because I feel like out of all the stuff that I have talked about when it comes to what the writers could do with Akita's return, this one is by far the most likely thing that would actually happen when it comes to Akita's return, and it's for a lot of different reasons. For starters, and by far the most obvious one, the writers set this up at the end of the Ice chapter. During the final episode of the Ice chapter, we heard Akita narrating the final few moments of the episode, and she talked about the idea of seeing Lloyd again, ending the season with the line, "Never is a very long time," clearly setting up the idea of her returning and her and Lloyd reuniting again at some point. So the writers actually following through on that with Akita's return, I feel like that's something that would make a lot of sense, because we have the setup for it. It would only make sense to follow through with that. However, that's not all, because I feel like when it comes to the show continuing on with the Lloyd and Akita dynamic, I feel like this may have subtly been foreshadowed with that comic that I talked about earlier, because when it comes to the comic that Akita appears in, even though, like I said, she only has a cameo appearance, something that's really interesting about this appearance is that when it comes to Akita in the comic, we can actually see that she is watching over Lloyd in the beginning of the comic, which is a detail that I think is really interesting. And I feel like this could potentially act as some kind of foreshadowing, setting up the idea of Lloyd and Akita potentially reuniting at some point. Also, speaking about the idea of Akita returning and her and Lloyd reuniting, this is actually something that a fan asked Kevin Burke, one of the head writers of Ninjago, with him saying that anything is possible as a result of the merge. Meaning that when it comes to Lloyd and Akita reuniting, I feel like this is something that could happen, given again, this is a question that was actually answered by one of the people who works on Ninjago, and not only that, one of the head writers, which is something that I think is pretty interesting. And when it comes to an actual continuation of the Lloyd and Akita dynamic that we saw during the Ice chapter, I feel like there's a couple things that the writers could potentially do with this. For starters, we could see something pretty similar to what we saw happen during the Ice chapter, with Lloyd and Akita being there for each other, and the two of them being able to help the other one work through some kind of tough situation that they're in. As for what exactly that tough situation could be, I'm not entirely sure, but when it comes to Lloyd, I feel like something that we could see is him actually opening up about the struggles revolving around him being a mentor for Eren and Sora, because as we see during Season 1 of Dragons Rising, and even when it comes to the clips so far that have been released for Season 2 of Dragons Rising, we see that when it comes to Lloyd, he's clearly having a lot of struggles and doubts revolving around him being a teacher, and so something that we might see if he and Akita were to reunite is Lloyd actually opening up about this stuff, given that when Lloyd and Akita were traveling together during the Ice chapter, Lloyd opened up about his emotional struggles that he was going through. So the show doing something similar, I could see that happen. And we could also see the exact same kind of thing happen with Akita, with her also potentially opening up about any kind of emotional struggles that she's going through. I think that would be interesting, and I feel like it would make sense because that was a major thing that we saw with these two during the Ice chapter, the two of them just opening up about the struggles that they were going through. But another big thing that I feel we could see if we were to see a continuation of the Lloyd and Akita dynamic is the two of them potentially actually getting together as a couple. This is something that I feel we could see because, as I pointed out on a few different occasions, you can tell based on Lloyd and Akita's interactions over the events of the Ice chapter that the two of them do care about each other a lot, and the two of them like one another and have feelings for each other, with the entire thing concluding during the final episode of the Ice chapter with Akita giving Lloyd a kiss on the cheek. And as I pointed out on so many different occasions, this is a very big moment for the two of their characters, and I feel like this was the perfect culmination of their storyline over the events of the Ice chapter, and I feel like this moment does a really great job at representing just how close these two have become over the events of the Ice chapter, because with Akita giving Lloyd a kiss, it's meant to represent her giving Lloyd a symbol of her love, and when it comes to Lloyd, this moment is meant to represent him taking comfort in his loved ones and the people who care about him, with Akita being one of those people. But when it comes to all this stuff, I go over it a lot more in my video talking about why I like the ship between Lloyd and Akita, so I highly recommend that you go and check that out. But again, I feel like when it comes to the show doing some kind of continuation of the Lloyd and Akita dynamic, the show doing some more stuff with Lloyd and Akita's relationship, honestly, I could see the show doing something with that, and the show potentially expanding upon the relationship that we already saw between these two during season 11. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. So, for a quick recap when it comes to this whole thing, like I said earlier, as for when and how Akita is going to return when it comes to Dragons Rising, I feel like this is something that we're going to see when the ninja inevitably go back to the Neverrealm at some point during the event of Dragons Rising. And as for why the ninja would go back to the Neverrealm, again, while I don't have an exact idea as to why the ninja would go back, like I said, an interesting idea that I do have revolves around the ninja trying to get Fritz back to his family. That's something that I feel we could potentially see. And as for what exactly the writers could do with Akita's character if she were to actually return, once again, I'm not entirely sure, but some of my ideas that I do have involve Akita being open to the idea of people from other realms ending up in the Neverrealm, the show potentially delving into more stuff with Akita's powers, tying stuff with Akita into the Ice Emperor story, and her potentially forgiving Zane for the stuff that he did as the Ice Emperor, and like I said, the most obvious and by far the most likely thing to happen, a continuation of the stuff that we saw with her and Lloyd during the events of season 11. Now personally, as for what I would really like to see when it comes to the show bringing Akita back, personally, I would really like to see the last two things happen, with the show tying in stuff with Akita to the Ice Emperor story and Zane potentially seeking forgiveness for the stuff that he did as the Ice Emperor, and a continuation of the stuff that we saw with Lloyd and Akita during the Ice chapter. Personally, that is something that I would really like to see happen, but we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. However, before I end the video, there is something that I want to tell you guys about, and that is an update of my Ice chapter video. So for those of you who are newer to my channel and don't know, I am currently working on a massive breakdown of the Ice chapter that is going to be released on the 5-year anniversary of the Ice chapter on August 19th. And I'm going to be giving you guys updates all throughout the year when it comes to the progress that I'm making on this video. And currently, at the time of me making this video, I want to let you guys know that when it comes to the script for this video, I can confidently say that I'm about halfway through the entire script for the video. At the time of me making this video, I have just started page 14 of the script, and there are currently a little over 10,000 words in the entire script. And like I said, I'm at about the halfway point when it comes to this whole thing, and I still have a lot of stuff to talk about. I still have to talk about the Neverrealm, I gotta talk about the episodes, and I haven't even scratched the surface of stuff when it comes to Akita, which, by the way, I can guarantee you that when it comes to the stuff revolving around Akita, that is most likely going to take up about 1/3 of the entire video because of how much stuff I have to talk about when it comes to her. So I really hope that you guys are looking forward to this video. Personally, I really am, and I cannot wait to finally release this video on the 5-year anniversary of the Ice chapter. It is something that I am really, really looking forward to. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. So tell me down below, what do you guys think? Tell me, what are your guys' thoughts when it comes to the idea of Akita returning during the event of Dragons Rising? Again, tell me down below, and I hope you guys enjoy. Later, guys, this is Dimension Master Studios, signing off.